Well, thanks for another great video, Joe. Some of us still reside in the reality-based community, and thank you for speaking out. I'm going to back you up on this. And not just you, there are many others like us who think along these same terms, because we don't live in a Wall Street bubble. Nor do we live in some kind of a faked recovery. So I'm going to read a little bug flying around here. I'm going to read a response to an article which was posted, and I'm going to post a link to that particular article as well, which essentially debunks the argument that somehow we're going to emerge from this financial disaster as somehow without any scars, or basically the article said, look, don't worry, everything's going to be fine. Well, things are not going to be fine. So here's the rebuttal from someone else, not my own words. As I understand it, America has been a net importer of almost everything since the U.S. government transferred virtually all of its power to corporations in the 1960s and 70s, which in turn has fueled challenges to domestic labor markets. This means working people, okay? Labor markets is a synonym for working people. We're considered markets. One of the points I've yet to note cited by any other author is the reality that U.S. corporations are somehow indebted to U.S. consumers, whereas in fact there is no such relationship and never was. Corporate ideology is driven by profit and averting loss, which again challenges any thesis that American corporations have any concern about what happens to American consumers if there are more lucrative markets abroad. Transnational corporate ideology, or theology you might call it, resides in degrees of control and monopoly of markets and resources without consideration of who gets hurt, as long as the profits continue to roll in for its directors and wealthy institutional banksters, and possibly the better classes of the voting shareholders. Everyone else is essentially expendable, listed on the balance sheet as accounting externalities. Why else would corporations continue to increasingly transfer production equipment and capital investments into jurisdictions where they are able to exploit small countries with cheap labor markets, except to further profit by contemporaneously, okay, I'm not an intellectual, folks, fleecing domestic consumers to pay massive profit margins for name brands. Bottom line, for almost 40 years, the U.S. has progressively become more and more dependent as a net importer of virtually everything. And that trend is guaranteed to continue because the economy belongs entirely to the bankstering and corporate directors. To emphasize this point, consider the cost to an investor analyzing cost and benefit ratios to rebuild the American manufacturing sector. To repair this sector, it would have to involve state-of-the-art steel mills, auto plants, assembly plants, a 5 to 10 year process of planning, acquiring technology, machinery and equipment which operates on robotic functions, then building plants and hiring a handful of technologists to monitor a small workforce feeding, unloading and stockpiling production. A dollar buys a lot more labor in literally every jurisdiction around the planet, except for Western Europe, of course, than in the US. Then factor in the reality foreign labor markets, in other words, people who are working in foreign countries, that are far more stable and productive than domestic labor markets here. In other words, there is absolutely no way that an American or Western labor force can compete with low wages all over the planet. So it is very much a race to the bottom and a race towards slave wages, essentially, across the board. Then weigh in the balance of projected loss and delay of profits during future contract negotiations with domestic labor, plus legal costs to fight the unions, trying to negotiate more medical coverage or pension benefits for American workers, all of which is completely dwindling at this point. Whereas there are no unions, no medical benefits or pensions in the equation elsewhere in third world countries. The business model that Nike has refined is a perfect system designed to exploit low labor costs across the globe. And it happens to fit in just with the exact corporate system whereby local politicians are greased to control the workforces in a suspended state of limbo, teetering on the brink of sustainability during a productive life cycle, beginning as children. Once these labor markets mature, in other words, they become aware that they've been screwed, they become expendable. And Nike moves its entire operation, and it's not just Nike, of course, to another country, based on the ability to exploit peasant slaves compelled to work under the force and duress of jackboot authority without any concern for people whatsoever. The endless war, as it's called, is essentially a necessity for these corporate businesses because it cultivates the seeds of domestic greed elsewhere, not here anymore, possibly, who are willing to pay more taxes for the U.S. military-industrial complex to continue acquiring resource-rich countries so that everyone can keep paying at the pumps feeding Exxon, Monsanto, and Gap, while pretending the American dream is still alive.